I'm coming back with the In the Bush Final 7 challenge. This is going to be my improvised hunting weapon. Now, I'm in southeastern Kentucky. We have two things. We got a lot of water and we got a lot of varmints. So I'm making kind of a multi-purpose tool. Now, when I thought about this, I thought about doing it with hardwood. But the thing is with hardwood is it's brittle, and there are other materials that are found nearby that I can use that'll do the exact same thing and give me a bunch of benefits that I don't have to build around. So what I'm building is just your classic 4-tined fish spear, but this is not only a fish spear. Primarily, first thing, it's an amphibian spear. I want to kill frogs. That's what I want to kill. I'll be very upfront about it. I want to kill frogs. But I can use it another way that I've seen used a lot. Actually, I've seen people do this in person. Is once I get my tines on here, I can stick this down varmint holes, like groundhog holes, and actually twist this into their hide and back them out just by applying downward pressure and pull them straight out of their hole. I've seen it done. It's actually very, very effective. So I'm building a varmint spear, basically, a small animal spear. I wouldn't mind, you know, popping out a bird's nest out of a tree with this thing, or I'd take a chance with some fish and some shallow water. But this is primarily an amphibian spear, a small varmint spear. This is a great accompaniment to traps, because if I have a trap that's halfway thrown, I can throw it. I can use it as a reaching device. But once I get this spear built, we can kind of talk about how it works. So I'm going to readjust the camera. I'm going to show you the materials that I have. This is a locally harvested cane, just like a cane pole, just like a fishing pole, but it's a little bit too big around, so this will make a perfect spear. And I'm going to cut it down. I'm going to do all this on camera. I'm going to bind it with some natural cordage, because that's part of the requirement of this challenge, is that I don't use any store-bought items other than tools. So I'm going to use this Mora clipper that I got in the mail today, and I'm also going to use this saw probably a little bit, and I may even break out my folding pocket knife, but I doubt it. And that'll be our little primitive hunting device, this hunting tool that we're doing, so stick with me. Alright, I've readjusted my camera a little bit so I can show you me working on the spear. What I've got is just this piece of cane pole. I cut it down with a folding saw. This one's actually dry. It was dead standing. It's pretty dry. If it's not dry, the first thing you want to do after you get this done would be fire harden it and boil the moisture out of it. I'm not going to do that because this is already dry. It's already pretty hard. And like I said, my primary goal is to kill amphibians, bullfrogs or some type of small amphibious animal that's soft, has soft hide that I can kill easily. First thing I'm going to do is, with cane pole, it's broken up into cells with membranes. I'm going to cut this one off. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come all the way back down here, and I'm actually going to tie a piece of cordage around this, and that's going to keep my cane pole from splitting all the way up when it makes impact. So I'm going to bind it closed at the bottom. And what I'm going to do that with is this tulip poplar bark, like I've been using most of this challenge. Now, one of the things I talked about in the last video, in the spring spear video, is when you're using natural cordage, you don't want to tie a traditional knot. It's not like tying your shoe. What you want to do is you want to just use the frictional force of the bindings to hold itself. So we're going to come right below this membrane, this cell here, and we're going to just lash it off. So just kind of bear with me a little bit. It's kind of a slow process, but we're going to get a good tight binding here, and then we'll move on. I do this binding by lapping over the first side, and then I'm just going to come as tight as I can, and right when I get to the end of my cordage, I'm going to come back and make some space in my loop, pass it back under. So it does form a knot, but it's a knot around the actual object, and pull it tight. This is short pieces of cordage. I'm going to use a longer piece to actually do this binding, but you get the idea from there. Now first thing we're going to do, this is freshly harvested tulip poplar bark. The inner bark's what we want, so we're just going to peel this outer bark off. This is what I've done for every piece of cordage that I've used that's tulip poplar bark in this challenge. Now this is going to be wet. It's great to work with when you're making a tool, because if I did work hard in this, or if I use this tool in a, I hate to say this, but in a survival situation, if I was to use this tool in the woods, as this cordage dried, it would constrict and it would tighten itself. I'm going to pull me off a pretty hefty piece here. Then I'm going to process it down and make it more narrow. What I'm doing is I'm pulling off this brittle outer bark. That's going to make me these ribbon-like pieces of inner bark that are fibrous and tough. They're stringy, so it's like a bunch of tiny little strings working together. Now, while I'm doing this, I'll tell you why I'm splitting this this cane pole. I could just sharpen it on one end, and yeah, I could probably kill some things. But the number one thing with a spear, or a gig if you want to call it that, is that you want to be able to retrieve what you've gigged, especially underwater, because it's just going to be gone. So when I spread those tines, when they hit, they're going to kind of spread out a little bit within the animal and pinch it back inside. Also, I can show you with my hands, it's just simple geometry. My tines are spread like this. Once I puncture the animal where it's spread, that meat would have to tear more to let go, and it'll hold in the animal. So a spread tine spear is excellent for killing small animals. Come back below the cell, and I'll do my wrap as tightly as I can. Now, if you have sinew, say you kill a deer, you find a dead deer, and you harvest sinew, first thing, boil that dead deer and eat it, and quit goofing around with the spear. But if you have sinew, or you have commercial cordage, this goes a lot faster. But we're not using that for this challenge. We're going to use this bark, and we're going to use some vines possibly. If I'm not happy with this product, we may use the vines. I'm just going to limber it up a little bit, get done lashing it together. I think the trick to good bark binding, a good inner bark binding, is it doesn't look good. If this looks good, I've done it wrong. There's nothing pretty about survival or bushcraft, or whatever you want to call it. Now, if I break this off, it's going to do just fine. I could leave these tag ends, they're not going to hurt anything, but we are in a challenge, so I'm going to cut this off and make it nice and pretty. The Mora clipper, by the way, is my least favorite of the Mora knives. This thing is hideous, doesn't function very well. I did get this in a trade, and if you're in the trade groups, you'll probably see it go up for trade sometime soon. And that's saying a lot, considering I'm obsessed with Moras. I've got tons of them, I love them, and this one's not staying here. So there you go, Mora. Sue me if you want to. Folks at home, don't buy a Mora clipper. I hate them. Okay, that's got our primary binding. It's going to get tighter once I split this. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Baco Laplander, which one of the things that I've told other people before, folding saw is great, but if you're building traps, buy yourself a Swiss Army knife, a Victorinox Farmer, because you got a saw, you got a fine blade, you don't need all this big stuff. But my Farmer's laying at home, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. There. Got it cut off. That gets us to the hollow point, and these are going to be our tines. So next thing we got to do, unfortunately, I have to use this Mora clipper again. And there's a couple different ways to do this. One way is incredibly unsafe. That would be cutting toward your hand like this, and you wind up with a scar like that one, and your hand pops whenever you close it. So don't do it that way. I'm going to lay my blade down flat on my log. Make sure I'm in camera still. I'm going to stick my pole right on top of it, and I'm just going to push. Now, I may have to push hard, but no way I'm cutting myself. You'll see I've split that now. I'm going to turn it the other way and split it the other way. Try to get them fairly even. If it's not perfect, I'm not worried about it. The frogs won't know the difference. There we go. Got 4 split. Now I know you're saying, Brett, those were just as deep as your blade is. And that's okay, because now I can just stick my knife in, or I could even stick a wooden wedge in if I was worried about my knife steel, which I'm not. I could stick a wooden wedge in here and split these on down. This is going to form my tines. It's going to tighten this binding, and it's going to keep my pole from splitting all the way down. The great thing about cane poles, my binding has come all the way off. The great thing about working with cane pole is, where it's segmented, is it's not going to do a lot of splitting all the way out, but I have had it happen before, so just keep that in mind. Let's switch to another piece of cordage. We'll switch to this what my dad calls sour vine. This is Virginia creeper though. We're going to do that same thing. We're going to lap it, wrap it around and around and around. If you're working with vine, you're going to use a lot of stuff. And the reason being is vine is brittle. It's strong, but it's brittle. All the way around, all the way around, all the way around. No reason to go around this 10 or 12 times. It's the closure that we're worried about. So, we'll stick it back in, pull it tight, make me a knot here, sort of a knot, a friction knot, but it's still a knot. And that is going to close it off pretty good. And like I said, we can kind of tweak it and take it another direction if we need to, just so it gets pretty good closure. It gets pretty tight, because when I split it, it's going to tighten up itself. There we go. You know what? We'll do that in a minute. I don't feel like fooling with it. I'll split our cane pole all the way down to that next cell. And we're going to go back and find our preliminary split that we already did with a knife. There it is. Stick the knife back in it. We're going to split it back down. Get inside here. I'm telling you, it does not pay to not have good knife safety skills, and I'm the world's worst for not taking my time with a knife. Okay, that's got our tines. Now the next thing I did, and I've done this ahead of time, was I just split some pieces of maple down. Actually, this is poplar right off the tree, and I'm going to spread these tines out. Now, right now I've got 3 tines, and I could leave it at that, but I'm going to go ahead and split one of these down and make a 4th tine, just because that's more chances to spear an animal. There we go. Got 4 tines. Now technically we have 5, I suppose, but we can go from there. I'm going to drive this wedge in here, and that's going to spread those tines out. I'm definitely going to have to fast forward in this video. I'm going to keep you guys here all night watching me stick sticks and other sticks. It's going to be my next YouTube channel name, Sticking Sticks and Other Sticks and Other Bushcraft Goodness. Now this is going to be, if I was an artist, which if anybody called me an artist, I'd probably get mad at them. But if I was an artist, this is going to take an organic shape. My tines aren't going to be even. And I know when you look in the books, everything's pretty and even. If you want pretty and even, don't give me a challenge where I can't use anything but natural cordage. Now I'm going to bind this before I sharpen these tines, but this thing's ready to go. I sharpen those tines. I got all kinds of pokey surfaces. I can jab an amphibian, but I can also get it caught. I'll do it on my t-shirt here. If I can get it caught in the fur of another animal and twist, you'll see how it's twisting up, and I can actually pull him out of a hole. And that's going to hurt him, and he's going to come out mad, but then I'm going to thump him in the head and eat him. Okay, let's go ahead and do a quick bind in here. And you'll notice I've went through a couple pieces of cordage. You may test your cordage in the field, you can do whatever you want, but as soon as you get out there and start working with it, you'll realize everything doesn't work the first time you try it. You know, this is more tulip poplar bark. This is a good long piece that I had left over from trap making. And I have to say to Mike Gibson, I've had real fun building these traps, but you wouldn't know it to hear me talk about it. I've been miserable for 2 days trying to build traps. There, got my binding, all one piece of cordage. I have had a lot of fun. It's been very satisfying building these different types of traps, but man, doing it, it's kicked my butt. Okay, now we're going to sharpen our tines. It's real easy to sharpen bamboo or cane pole. It's all the same, really. It's real easy to sharpen, and the reason being is because it's so fibrous, and the fibers follow all the way out. So once you split it, and get that point started, it'll split all the way out and be sharp. We're going to go ahead and sharpen this. And I'm just hitting as many times as I can at once, because I want this thing sharp. All I got to do is get through the animal's skin into the muscle tissue. One thing, if I hit a frog with this, he's dead. That's game over for the frog. I would do so much tissue damage with just the spear getting under his skin that he'll die. He'll go into shock and he'll die. Okay, those are pretty pointy. Got a couple of ends that are a little wobbly, but they're going to break off in the first couple of tries. And that is going to be my frog spear. It's not long. I don't want to stick all the way through the frog and 3 feet into the ground. But that's going to allow me to jab, twist, pull. Jab, twist, pull. That breaks any hold that he has on the ground and allows me to move on. Now I'm going to move back and I'm going to show you a couple things about the selection of the material that I've used, and then we're going to wrap up with just talking a little bit more about primitive weapons and improvised weapons. I'm very happy with the way this turned out. If I wasn't, I'd change it. This is exactly what I wanted: a small amphibian spear, small varmint spear. I think it turned out very well. Let's back off and we'll talk about material selection and we'll wrap up. Stick with me. Alright guys, this is my amphibian spear, my little varmint catcher and retriever, or my frog killer. It's a little frog gig. It's very similar to a little frog gig that I carry in one of my bags. It's a pre-made gig that I bought at like Walmart or something. Actually, I think I got it off Ike Moore. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. As you can see, my pole is a little bit over my arm span. And the reason being is I can really get down and really put a lot of power into using this spear. My tines are spread nice and wide. And if you look, my tines are pointy. And the reason that I have these blocks in here is they keep them from collapsing. Now, when I stick an animal with this, his muscle tissues are going to try to stay together. So that's what I'm simulating here. When I stick that animal, just those tines being spread is going to allow me to retrieve him and keep him on the spear. I'm going to hit him hard. I'm going to pin him down because this is a meal right here. This is a great tool for retrieving animals out of holes as well. And if I jam this back in a hole in the ground and get that twisted in that fur like I showed you in my t-shirt, especially now that it's sharp, I can pull him out of that hole. He's not going to want to come, but he'll come. I'm very happy with this. This is my final portion of the In the Bush Final 7 Challenge. I got everything done. So, I'm Brett Burns, Improvised Hunting Tool. Thanks, guys.